Hello guys, Nat Blue here with a new video. Today I wanted to talk about the updates to the classes in the 2024 revised 5e. So I have watched all of these on YouTube. So Dungeons and Dragons released a lot of official videos going over some class changes. You can find me reacting to those on my YouTube channel. So if you want to go check those out, you can do that either before or after this video. It doesn't really matter too much. Some of my opinions have changed from then, but that's okay. We will go through that a little bit. And then I've also just gone on D&D Beyond to see if I'm just missing anything. I do have some notes on a monitor over here, so I will be glancing back and forth between my two main monitors throughout this video just to double check those notes. There's a lot of information here, guys. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I am using a wired handheld microphone, so I hope there's not too much handling noise, but we are just going to dive right into this, starting with the class I'm least excited about, which is the Druid. So, a few things with the Druid. I like that you can cast Speak with Animals with the Druidic feature, so that's really cool. Or not even cast. I think you can just speak with animals from what I was reading. You can now use Find Familiar with a charge of Wild Shape, which is also really cool if you're not using your Wild Shape too often. You can just summon a familiar. I like that you can speak in Wild Shape. That's also really cool. It just makes it a lot easier to communicate with your party that way. And then at level 18, you can cast spells in the Wild Shape form. So that's also great. I love that. Now, a few things that I'm not sure how I feel about. They haven't mentioned whether or not you can become an owlbear. And I feel like after Honor Among Thieves and Baldur's Gate 3, a lot of people were waiting to see if that was just going to be put into the game. And I think it would have just been nice to hear that from Wizards of the Coast that they are putting it in the game. I don't know how I feel about the Circle of Land being able to change the land they're connected with when they finish a long rest. I understand they're adding some versatility to like all of the classes in this game. But I did like the theming of being connected to land for a specific reason. So maybe you're connected to the tundra because you were raised in like an Arctic setting. I just kind of liked that. I think this is something I can get used to though. It's not a big drawback. And then they did change the HP pool to temp HP, which nerfs the Druid a little bit. Especially the Circle of the Moon Druid, which heavily relies on Wild Shape. Your Wild Shape can't be used as often. So it used to be when your Wild Shape hit 0 HP, you went to your HP pool. And while in your HP pool, you can just cast Wild Shape again. This was great for the Circle of the Moon Druid, which was able to do it as a bonus action. I think every Druid can now do it as a bonus action, which is really cool. Or it being casting Wild Shape, but I feel like they just nerfed it because the Druid was just such a tanky character, but I think people liked the Druid being a tanky character, so I don't know if I would have nerfed this myself. And then something about specifically the Dungeons and Dragons video on Druids that I wasn't a huge fan of is they kept repeating that the Circle of the Sea they didn't want to have an Aquaman problem with. My gripe with this is that Aquaman's an amazing superhero, and there's not an Aquaman problem. He's very useful on land. He has super strength, enhanced reaction times. He's just an incredible fighter. He's able to use multiple weapons. He's just a very useful superhero, and I feel like people just slander Aquaman too much, and I don't understand why. Next on the list of classes I'm not super excited about the changes to. At number 11, we have Paladin. So, a few positives with Paladin, because we should start with the positives always. They can now cast spells at level 1, which is cool. They have an access to the full fighting style list that the fighter has, which is really cool. Or they can choose to take a Cleric cantrip instead. I don't know if I would. If I wanted a Cleric cantrip, I would just play a Cleric. If I wanted a fighting Cleric, I would have just played a War Domain Cleric. So, I don't know. I would just pick a fighting style if it was me, but I mean, that's all up to personal preference. Divine Sense now lasts 10 minutes instead of 1 round, which is great. That makes it a lot easier to use in exploration. All paladins now get the Find Steed spell, which is cool. You can cast it once a day without expending a spell slot. It makes it so you can use steeds more frequently in your game. It's not something I've ever really been able to use. The only steeds I've ever had I bought in like a town and then forgot about them and left them in like the woods somewhere. So I think this is really cool. I mean, was it necessary? Probably not, but why not? Why not just give it to them? The thing that I don't like about this, and the thing a lot of people don't like about the changes to the Paladin, is Divine Smite became a spell slot. So you can cast it for free once a day, which is fine, but it does now cost a bonus action. So that means you can only Divine Smite once a turn. And I know this is probably a damage balance thing. Paladins were able to do a lot of damage in a turn if they had enough spell slots. But isn't that the point of playing a Paladin? Nobody's playing the Paladin for the theming of a Holy Warrior. Or probably not most people. I mean, there's certainly people that are. I don't want people to think that I'm saying that nobody plays something for the theme of a character. Nobody's playing it for Find Steed. Nobody's playing it for Divine Sense. People want to smite. That's the main point of playing a Paladin, is you get to smite. Divine Smite is the most used smite because it didn't take a bonus action. So Branding Smite, Searing Smite, those all took bonus actions. If those take the same action economy as Divine Smite, what's the point of using Divine Smite? Unless you're fighting an enemy that takes more damage to radiant damage, like an undead or something, why not use something like Branding Smite that can catch clothes on fire, or Searing Smite that can blind an enemy? Why would you use a smite that doesn't give an extra effect? You know what I mean? So I just think it was kind of a mistake to change Divine Smite. I understand they just wanted to make sure the Paladin wasn't doing too much damage. But like I said, just let the Paladin do too much damage, guys. Just give them the thing that they want. Next is the Fighter. So there's a few things I really like about the changes to the Fighter. You do get more uses of Second Wind, which is great. I love Second Wind. I wasn't a huge fan of how you only got to use it once a day anyways. You can change your fighting style every time you gain a fighter level. I loved the way that Jeremy Crawford and Todd talked about this. It makes sense that a fighter can like train on a different weapon or a different fighting style while they're resting. I think it also makes sense depending on your background, because you could be like a retired soldier or something, and you are trying out a new fighting style, and it's like riding a bike. You just get right back into it. I love the studied attack ability at level 13. It gives you advantage on the next attack roll if you miss a target. To me, that makes a lot of sense. You swing at a target, and then you're like, oh, this is why I missed. You correct yourself, hit the target the second time. I think that's really cool for like a strategic fighter. The Battle Master has more initiatives now. To me, that's a negative. So I'm a very indecisive player. I don't know about you guys. This is a very personal preference kind of thing with a fighter. I don't want more options. The Battle Master already had a lot of more maneuvers. With Weapon Mastery being introduced, I think this is just going to make things really complicated when you're playing a fighter. And the fighter is one of the best entry-level classes. So I don't want it to be more complicated. I want it to be a little bit more easy to understand. But, I mean, a lot of people are probably going to get very excited about this. I cannot get excited about the Psy Warrior. I just don't think it sounds fun. I know a lot of people are probably going to like it. I don't think it sounds as fun as the other fighter subclasses. Next on the list is the Ranger. So I'm sure a lot of people already know why this is a little low, but we're going to go through this the same way we've gone through the others, with the positives first. Favorite enemy changed to allow you to cast Hunter's Mark twice a day without expending a spell slot. So that's cool. I mean, I always like abilities that make it so you don't have to use your spell slots. Rangers also get a 10-foot speed boost instead of 5 feet at level 6, as long as they aren't wearing heavy armor. So that makes sense to me. Heavy armor should slow you down. Tireless at level 10 allows you to gain temp HP by using an action. So they say this is supposed to be like you pushing through. It sounds like a weaker version of Second Wind, and I'm fine with that. To me, the Fey Wanderer and the Gloomstalker seem really fun to play, partially just for thematic reasons, though. I love the Shadowfell. I love the Feywild. I just think that those just seem like fun subclasses to me. They're probably the only two Ranger subclasses I would play, because I don't have much interest in the others. The Beastmaster does see significant changes, which makes it a playable class, which is cool for anybody that's ever wanted to play a Beastmaster. It was not very good in the 2014 edition. But now for the negative. The thing that everybody is talking about with the Ranger. Hunter's Mark shouldn't require concentration. So, Favorite Enemy allows you to cast it twice a day without expending a spell slot. And that's cool. Like I said, I love being able to save spell slots. The issue is you can't use a concentration spell with that saved spell slot because you're concentrating on Hunter's Mark. If you're going to make it such a key ability to the Ranger, it seems like the class is built around Hunter's Mark in these updates. Don't make it require concentration, because then the Ranger isn't going to use any other concentration spells. The easy way to fix this is to homebrew it doesn't require concentration. But I feel like Wizards of the Coast should have known better than doing this in the first place. I feel like they knew that people didn't want it to require concentration. So it would have been cool if they would have just made that change themselves instead of requiring the DMs to make that decision. Next after the Ranger is the Rogue. So this is where it starts to get a little muddied. I am not unexcited for the Rogue. It's just not my kind of class. So sneak attacks can do more than just damage. So that's cool. It adds a little bit of versatility like the other classes are getting. I don't know if I would use this because I like sneak attack damage. It's the point of sneak attack. And then I don't like how one of the options for sneak attack is to poison somebody instead. I feel like as a rogue, if you have a poisonous kit or poison on your person, you should just be able to put it on your weapon, and it shouldn't matter if you're sneak attacking or not. You should just be able to poison somebody, right? Like that's the point of having a poisonous kit, I think. Assassinate does give the assassin rogue advantage on initiative rolls, and the target doesn't need to be surprised anymore. They just can't take an action before they get attacked. So this edition, or this update to 5e, has changed how surprise works. Now, if a creature is surprised, they just get disadvantage on initiative rolls. So giving the assassin advantage on initiative rolls makes a lot of sense here, because then it almost guarantees they're going to go ahead of whoever they're surprising, which means they can use assassinate. There are times that that's not going to work. Some of the enemies might roll incredibly high on their disadvantage. Maybe the assassin rogue rolls incredibly low on their disadvantage. I've done it before. I am not good at rolling dice. The Arcane Trickster now does have a better version of Versatile Trickster. So when you trip someone, your Mage Hand can also trip someone. Mage Hand still feels like it was made for the Arcane Trickster, which is fine. Arcane Trickster, I think, can still make the Mage Hand invisible at later levels. And now the Mage Hand can just trip people. So Mage Hand goes from being a decent cantrip to being amazing for the Arcane Trickster. I also think there's just rogue weapons that have a weapon mastery that allows you to trip easier, so that's also a really cool thing there. Now, I can't get excited over the Soul Knife or the Thief. The Soul Knife just doesn't seem like my kind of character. I'm sure a lot of people will love the Soul Knife. It doesn't seem like my cup of tea. The Thief just seems boring to me. If I'm going to be stealing, I'm going to just use an Arcane Trickster that can do it with that invisible Mage Hand. Or I'm going to just give a character high sleight of hand, because that's an option. I just have a high dex character, make them proficient in sleight of hand, give them a background that adds to it, that kind of stuff. Just makes a lot of sense to me that way. So, after the Rogue, we have the Cleric. So, I do love this artwork. This is maybe some of my favorite artwork from this player's handbook. It looks like it's a Cleric casting something, probably sunlight, to damage a bunch of vampires. And you can't see it in this picture because of the way that I cropped it. I think Historian's just in this picture in one of the corners. So if you want to see that, just look up the picture or watch the video that I did about the Cleric because I talk about it in there. I just love this picture. So, a few things with the Cleric. Divine Intervention at level 10 allows you to cast a Cleric spell of level 5 or lower without expending a spell slot. This can be done once per long rest instead of waiting 7 days to use Divine Intervention again. It does make it easier to cast Revivify, which I don't know if I like, because Revivify should be a harder spell to cast. I do like that Divine Intervention is easier to use, though. There was a very good chance in base 5e that Divine Intervention just wasn't going to work, and that never feels good. On the other side of that, I don't think your god should answer you every time you use Divine Intervention, so I think there's probably a good middle ground there. Greater Divine Intervention as your capstone ability allows you to use the Wish spell, which is also really cool. I like when you let people get insanely broken spells at high levels just for free. That's really cool. The Life Domain, now Preserve Life, works on undead and constructs, which means you can heal Warforged, Reborn, and undead summons. So that's really cool. I think that just makes it a lot easier than having to use Mending on your Warforged companion. So I do like that change. It just makes it easier in combat if you have a Warforged or something in your party. Next up on classes I'm not as excited for is the Wizard. So a few cool things with the Wizard to start off with. You can change your cantrip at the end of each long rest. So I think most spellcasting classes now have the ability to change their cantrip on level up, but the Wizard can do it at the end of each long rest because they're supposed to be very proficient spellcasters. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Memorize Spell allows you to swap a prepared spell with one from your spellbook during a short rest at level 5. So that's really cool. Since they're such studied spellcasters and they have more spells at their disposal with their spellbook, it just makes sense that they should have that ability to just swap to a different spell every so often. Wizards are still going to take a long time in combat, possibly longer, because they have an expanded spell list. Everybody has an expanded spell list, but the Wizard is famous for taking a long time in combat. Most Wizard players, since they're given so many options, just take a very long time to make decisions. And this was almost guaranteed in the Wizard video the Dungeons & Dragons posted, because I think Todd asked Jeremy Crawford about whether or not combat would be faster for Wizards now, and Jeremy pretty much said no. The Illusionist Wizard has seen great improvements in this update. Improved illusions can make it so you don't use a verbal spell component to make an illusion. And any illusion with a range of 10 feet now has been extended by 60 feet. From what I understand, that means that it could be up to 70 feet, which is insane for an illusion spell. And I like that. Minor illusion can now be cast as a bonus action and can make visual and auditory illusions at the same time if you're an illusionist. That makes a lot of sense to just buff one of the most common illusion spells. You can change conjuration spells to illusion spells without using a spell slot. You just have the number of hit points of that summon. So if you were doing like a summon fae, instead of physical beings coming out, you now have illusory versions of those beings come out. This could be really good in combat if you're just looking to change the action economy a little bit. So maybe you're fighting a lot of enemies, and you're like, oh, if I have a few summons, that will balance things out a bit. But you don't want to spend a spell slot because you want to spend that on something like Fireball. But this would also be very useful in like role-playing situations where you might need to distract some enemies. So maybe you're trying to distract people for the rogue to sneak in or for them to like lockpick something. And you could just summon a bunch of illusions. Depending on what you're using, you could summon them pretty far away from you and then just sneak past. So that's really cool. And those illusions, since they do have hit points, would make it so that the enemies have something to fight while you're sneaking away. So I love that. The one big thing with the wizard that I wish they had done is I wish they would have just put the necromancer in the core rulebook. I understand that there might not have been as many changes that they wanted to make for the necromancer, and they might have wanted to showcase how much they were buffing the illusionist, and the other wizard subclasses are just so integral to the wizard class that they didn't want to swap those guys with the necromancer. But I think the necromancer is one of the most popular wizard subclasses, so it would have just been cool to see that representation in the book instead of something like the illusionist, where I don't think as many people are going to play that. I could be wrong, but I think that the necromancer is just a little bit more popular than the illusionist is going to be. After the wizard, we have kind of like the stepbrother in D&D, the sorcerer. So I have a lot of really cool things I'm excited about with this class. First off, innate sorcery at level 1 makes it so you can use a bonus action to surge in power for 1 minute. This increases your spell save DC by 1 and gives you advantage on spell attack rolls, so that's really good. And then this gets even better at level 7, allowing you to put 2 meta magic options on that spell. You can also regain sorcery points equal to half your sorcerer level after a short rest once a day, so that's cool. Draconic Sorcerer can now use Dragon Breath, which makes a lot of sense for the subclass, and they can summon a dragon using Summon Dragon once a day without expending a spell slot, components, or using concentration, which is a really cool, like, higher level ability. Wild Magic Sorcerers can now Wild Magic Surge more often, and they have a new Wild Magic Surge table that I am really looking forward to looking at. They haven't released it yet. Casting a spell after Tides of Chaos now automatically triggers a surge. And then the Capstone ability allows you to trigger a surge of your choice once a day with a few exceptions. So like the very high level surges you cannot trigger. So I'm really excited about the changes to the Wild Magic Sorcerer. I think that is what this artwork is supposed to be, as a Wild Magic Sorcerer. Really excited for the changes to Wild Magic Sorcerer. I've always wanted to play one. I really want to see what that spell list looks like, and I'm happy that you're getting, or that they're making it easier for you to use those surges, because it was a kind of tough thing to do. You had to roll a specific number on a D100, I think, and a lot of DMs were homebrewing ways to surge more often anyway, so this is just a nice change to that. So after the Sorcerer is the Barbarian. There's a few things I'm really excited about here as well. You can keep your rage going as a bonus action. This is really good because you can also rage for longer now, because rage now has impact on non-combat situations, so like role-playing and stuff. You can use your rage to add, I think, your strength modifier to things like perception, so that's really cool. And then a couple of the things with the different subclasses. The Path of Berserker's Frenzy deals more damage on the first hit each turn and doesn't cause exhaustion, so that's always great. They can now end Charmed or Frightened using the Mindless Rage, so that's a really cool thing too. I love that. And then the new subclass for the Barbarian, why I put this a little bit higher up, the Path of the World Tree sounds sick. So you can teleport at the highest level, using the World Tree to teleport around. You can pull enemies towards you like Mortal Kombat's Scorpion. The Get Over Here effect is just really cool in my opinion. And then you can extend your weapon strikes by using branches of the World Tree. So that's really cool too. You swing your axe and a branch extends that swing by like 5 feet. That's just really sick. I love those abilities. I really want to play a Path of the World Tree Barbarian whenever this fully releases. I think it just sounds so fun. And it sounds really cool for like a Nordic campaign. And then after the Barbarian, I am really excited for the Warlock. So a few things with the Warlock. Magical Cunning allows you to restore half your max packed magic spell slots once a long rest by doing a minute ritual. This is a good ability for a spellcaster. It's not an amazing ability for a Warlock, because until like level 10 or 11, you have 2 spell slots. So you're restoring 1 spell slot once a day, or once a long rest, which normally means once a day. That's not an amazing ability. I think they should have given the Warlock more spell slots. That's my biggest gripe with the Warlock. They did make the packed boons magical invocations, so that makes it so you can get them at 4th level and you can stack them on top of each other, which I think is really cool. There are more familiar options like the Slad Tadpole, so similar to that Tadpole in Baldur's Gate 3. The Sphinx of Wonder, which I think sounds really cool. The artwork for it looks sick. You can see that artwork in my Warlock video. I just think the Sphinx of Wonder looks really cool. And it's a Celestial summon, which is cool since there is a Celestial Warlock. Or a Skeleton. Skeleton is also a really cool summon. Cantrip buffing invocations can now be used for other cantrips than Eldritch Blast. I doubt many people will use them for other cantrips or other damage dealing cantrips, I think, than Eldritch Blast. I don't think people will use it very often for other cantrips because Eldritch Blast is just a very high damage dealing cantrip. It's better than most of the other damage dealing cantrips like Firebolt. So I don't know. There are some examples that sound like they could be cool. So like, I think one of the examples they gave, it might have been Count of Cold. It's an ice spell, but the spell normally just slows an enemy and does a little bit of damage. But if you put something like Repelling Blast on that, you could slow the enemy and push them away from you, so it's even harder for them to get up in your face. So that's really cool. There are always prepared spell lists for each subclass, which makes a lot of sense for the theming of the Warlock. There's a better built-in way to contact your patron at level 9, which makes a lot of sense. I think Warlocks should have a good way to talk to their patron. I think level 9 might be a little bit too late to put it in there, but that's a different conversation. The Archfey Warlock I am incredibly excited for. So you are now able to teleport using Misty Step more often. You can cast it a certain number of times a day without using spell slots. And like the Ladrin, this Misty Step now has added effects. So I'm really happy about that. I wish they would just call it Fey Step since it's an Archfey patron, but that's a very small gripe about this. And then whenever you cast an enchantment or illusion spell starting at level 14, you can now just Misty Step. So that's really cool too. Celestial Warlock seems okay, just not a big fan of that. I do like that it's an option because there's so many different Celestials that aren't gods, like the Sphinx or something like a Solar. It would be really cool to be able to be a Warlock for one of those guys. The Great Old Ones Warlock, I am also incredibly excited for now. It was something that I was looking into in the prior edition, or the prior version of this edition. And they can now summon Abjurations, which could include a Mind Flayer, which is exciting. It's not the Mind Flayer. It's probably not as strong as the Mind Flayer, but it's still a cool option. You can turn damage into psychic damage when you use a Warlock spell, so that's really cool too. And you have an enhanced version of Hex that gives disadvantage on saving throws, which is also a really cool thing for the Warlock. So in second place for classes I am most excited for is my favorite class, the Bard. I love this artwork too. It looks like she's probably using like Dissonant Whispers or something on this guy. So the Bard has a lot of improvements for his class that was already incredibly good. You can now change cantrips when you level up. I think this is a thing for a lot of spellcasting classes, which is really good for certain cantrips that become less useful in the campaign or ones that are nullified by magic items. So maybe your magic item has a passive effect that makes your cantrip less useful, or maybe your magic item just does what your cantrip did. Bardic Inspiration now lasts an hour instead of 10 minutes, which means you now have an extra 50 minutes to remind your companions that they have a Bardic Inspiration, because everybody always forgets to use it anyways. Font of Inspiration allows you to get Bardic Inspiration back, which is great for certain players that love just tossing around Bardic Inspiration, and really good for certain subclasses like the Valor Bard that can use Bardic Inspiration to add damage to an attack. Counter Charm is greatly improved and is now a reaction that gives advantage on a saving throw instead of an action requiring a performance to give resistances and stuff. The old Counter Charm was not as useful because you had to expect to get frightened or charmed. So unless you're in a situation where you're walking into like a Fey environment or something, and you know there's a high chance you're going to get charmed, counter charm wasn't super useful. Magical secrets are now being restricted to taking from the wizard, druid, or cleric spell list. I do like this a little bit because thematically it makes more sense and it gives you less options, which makes for easier decisions when you're picking spells. I do think after thinking on it for a while from the bard video, since the bard video, I guess I should say, I don't think it makes as much sense as I thought it did. So I understand warlocks require a patron to be able to launch spells. The sorcerers require innate spell casting. You were born able to cast these spells, or there's a reason you can cast these spells. The paladin requires an oath to be able to cast spells. But doesn't a cleric require a guard to be able to cast spells? You could spin this. You could be a bard who's like, hey, DM, I would like to pray to the god of music to be able to launch this spell, or something along those lines. You could say, hey, I found a cleric scroll, or something like that, and that's how you launch the spell. But if you're going to give the restrictions on warlock and sorcerer, and paladin, who's a similar situation, same type of magic, then the cleric should also have that restriction. I think the druid makes, or the wizard makes the most sense here for being able to take spells from. But I understand they wanted to be able to give options for multiple different types of magic. So arcane magic with the wizard, primal magic with the druid, and divine magic with the cleric. I understand the reasoning. I just don't know if I still agree as much as I did. You can't choose any spell from another spell list starting at level 10. This is mostly a positive. So it does add a lot more flexibility. Bards can just take spells from other spellcasters from level 10 to level 20. That's a lot of spells to be able to take from people like wizards that have a lot of really good options. And I mean, you're going to take stuff like counterspell and stuff no matter what. The thing that some people might see as a negative for this is it does make the bard an incredibly formidable spellcaster. So they've always been a pretty good spellcaster. But it now makes it so you can just, you have more versatility than like warlocks and stuff now, pretty much. Every bard at 20th level now has Power Ward Kill and Power Ward Heal prepared, which are incredibly powerful spells. And they can cast these spells on 2 targets at a time, which is insane. Power Ward Kill, that means potentially defeating 2 enemies at once. Power Ward Heal could just save your party from a TPK. So those are incredible abilities. I love those 2 spells, and I love that the bard gets them anyways. And I like the explanation that the bards have magic from creation, and that's really cool. They have like creation magic. I never knew that lore behind them, but I think that's really sick. I love the College of Dance. I think that's a really cool addition to this update. I like that they can make an unarmed strike after using Bardic Inspiration. This gets really good because they can use Bardic Inspiration to move half their speed away without provoking opportunity attacks. But since they're using Bardic Inspiration to move away, and I think they can also move like allies away using that Bardic Inspiration, that means they just get an unarmed strike. So that's incredibly good. And then the College of Dance bard also gets improved evasion, which is really good because you can use it on allies. So you can also have an ally evade. And I think the theming of that is really cool because you could be like dipping somebody to avoid some of the damage from a fireball or something like that. So that's really sick. I feel like the College of Dance feels a lot like a monk bard. And I think that's a really cool combination. Which oddly enough brings us into our last class, the one I'm most excited for, the monk. So I have always been curious about playing a monk. I think, and I think a lot of people would agree with me here, the 5e monk sucked. We don't have to mince words here. The 5e monk was not good. They have made some incredible improvements. You can now use Unarmed Strike as a bonus action whenever. The Unarmed Strike changes makes this a great improvement. So Unarmed Strike can be used to grapple, push, or hit now. So that's really cool. Gives a lot of flexibility to like your second attack and everything. And can add to some really cool combos and stuff. Unarmed Strike damage is better, and it increases as they level up, which is great. It makes them able to stand with the other martial classes for damage output. I think that's always been one of my big gripes with a monk, is that fighters and paladins and everybody just seem to do more damage than monks do. So I like that they're able to stand alongside them a little bit better now. I like that key points got changed to focus points because I can call it FP and it saves me a few syllables, so that's really cool. Deflector's tax works as long as it deals bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage now, so the type of projectile doesn't matter. Deflect energies at higher levels can deflect any energy type, so you can use it to deflect like fire damage and stuff, so that's really cool too. Stunning Strike has been limited in the number of times you can use it, which is a positive, even if it doesn't seem like it, because Stunning Strike is a very powerful ability, and you don't want your player to be able to stun too many people. The Warrior of the Elements can now extend their reach for unarmed strikes using elemental damage, so that's really cool. And I think it gives a really cool theming to play like an avatar type character. Because imagine you throw a punch and then you use like the force of the wind to be able to extend that reach. That's really cool to me. You can also create torrents of energy to do more ranged damage with this subclass, which is great for a class that doesn't have a lot of options for ranged damage. The Warrior of Shadow can now see in magical darkness. This is probably the one I'm most excited for. You can also use this to fuel the Shadow Step ability. So Shadow Step requires you to step into a shadow. It's similar to Misty Step, but a little bit weaker. But if you can see in magical darkness, you can step into that magical darkness to attack people. So that's an incredible ability. And honestly, being able to see into magical darkness is not a common thing in D&D, so it's just very impressive that the monk is able to do that in the first place. Okay, so that is the last class. I'm very excited for these changes to the classes. I'm very excited to get my hands on a player's handbook. I really want the limited edition ones, like the ones that are going to game stores. I just need to find a game store to pre-order it from nearby, so I'll be looking into that soon. But I'm really excited for this stuff. I think they've made some great changes. I really want to see that wild magic table. And I hope you guys are also excited because I'm going to be making videos on it until I get through all of the content that I want to get through. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did like the video, you can leave a like. Please comment if you have different opinions on me on this, if you share opinions. If there's something you're specifically excited for, if I got something wrong, or if there's just added information you wanted to give me. So please I love comments. Please leave a comment. I'm excited to read them. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can subscribe to the channel. I really like doing D&D content, so I want to do it more often. Hit that notification bell if you want to see those videos as they release. And other than that, I hope everybody is having a great day. And until next time, peace.